We're setting off on a flight of fancy, back to an improbable palace that, not too long ago, was the heartbeat of the smartest, fastest place in the world, the ultimate resort for the bright young things and gay old ones. Back to the high temple of the Imperial Airways set, a fairy tale fortress designed to stupefy even the very rich. We're flying over to TOUQUET, a few short miles and 40 years away.
To Paris, to meet Tom, Dick, and Harry. But next time you reach Calais, travel north. You'll know you reach the TOUQUET when all the lads to you say, let's have a drink and you pay your north.
Monumental in its pine forest, TOUQUET's Royal Picardy called itself the most beautiful hotel in the world.
I'm one of the lads of TOUQUET. I'm just a smasher at croquet. I win their dollars and they get limp collars when all the old buffers I play. I'm one of the lads of TOUQUET. At indoor sports too, I'm okay. With the Duchess, the Minx, I have played tiddlywinks. I'm one of the lads of TOUQUET.
Sadly deserted by all its lads, the Royal Picardy stands forlorn. In cloistered silence, only dead chandeliers move. Its ghosts, the ghosts of the frantic 30s, who must have believed when they dwelt in ornate halls that they and this vast magnificence would live on forever. For once upon a jazz age, they, the Picardy and TOUQUET, stood at the very pinnacle of the social scale, and for style outdid even Mediterranean Monte Carlo. The Picardy catered for an indulgent society. Here the top people of an era came to stay, the smart set to play. Princes and presidents, generals and gigolos, the fatal women and the fated men of a frenetic age. It was designed for extremes, both in its facilities and in its guests. When the Maharaja of Kapurthala stayed here, he took over a whole floor. That's 50 rooms. The internal gymnasium was adequate, and the swimming pool suitably exotic. But like the rest of this hotel, there was nothing ordinary about its water. It was sparkling, aerated water. Everything had to be the ultimate, the very best. Like the hotel cigars that were so expensive, they had to be kept in the safe. But why did they build the Royal Picardy? It all began because TOUQUET was the very first resort to blossom and benefit from the air age. In the grey days of the Defence of the Realm Act, of Dora, big auntie of England, the state's energies were directed at moral reform. But rich escapees found they could easily fly away to get in on the fun and games next door. Fashion for the quick flip to TOUQUET was set by the Prince of Wales, who flew in one of those Hell's Angels biplanes. The poorer rich, without their own aircraft, made do with the new daily service of lumbering airliners, which offered gambling English businessmen a continental day off from the office. These champagne flights were the start of high life up in the skies. For the first time, the beaches, cafes and casinos of the Opal Coast were only a day return ticket from England's more sedate shores. TOUQUET is less than 100 miles from Croydon, just the right distance. So, on a 12-hour round trip, the airline offered 10 gambling hours. At the touchdown, the promising pleasure palaces awaited. For the British, TOUQUET had always been promising. They'd been gambling here since 1893, and by 1911, they're playing cricket, which you'll admit shows some continentals were jolly civilized even then. They were served by 7 deluxe hotels and 125 others, led by the Hotels des Anglais du Golf and the Hermitage, just across the road from the casino, and of course, the Westminster. This is where the elegants came to see and be seen, where every Millie could be thoroughly modern. Almost all visitors were English. Indeed, Le Touquet became a sort of crown colony, observing English behavior, practicing English pastimes, and pretending to ignore English royalty prancing about incognito. The Prince of Wales came here mainly for golf. Once he'd landed, he was plain Mr. Brown. Whenever he lost a match, which he usually did, the local press were most apologetic. For in those days, Mr. Brown was a royal swinger. He remained a Le Touquet enthusiast as King honoured his continental subjects by becoming master of the local drought. A Pied Piper to drink his health in a local concoction. A cocktail of Cointreau, kirsch and orange juice called, with an odious nod to Mr. Brown, the Prince's Smile. The sporty set pursued their smart outdoor daytime activities, though the object of the exercise was an indoor nighttime activity, gambling at the casino.
It was like a wedding cake. It was sparkling and enchanting, and everybody dressed up for it. And the stakes were terribly high. I mean, Gordon Selfridge used to sit down with about £50,000 worth of plaques. I'm very glad I wasn't a shareholder in Selfridge's, because I think a lot of it went in that sort of way.
Le Touquet's casino lured the world's flamboyant gamblers. The Maharani of Cooch-Behar chartered an aircraft to fly her mascots from London. 3 tortoises with golden shells to be placed beside her at the table for good luck. And 40 years ago, when the pound was proud, Jenny, one of the dancing Dolly sisters, won £56,000 one night, £40,000 the next. In 1928, with only a year to go before the Wall Street crash and the precipice of depression, these tables took more money than that plush prototype down on the sunny Côte d'Azur at Monte Carlo. Le Touquet's casino was the world's richest. So at these tables, the idea is born for an enormous super hotel, which will cash in on the tidal wave of English gamblers. It's to cost 120 million francs in all, or £1 million, and that's worth £4 million today. A 5-acre site outside here is soon cleared, and the first pickaxe falls. It is November the 20th, 1928. The backers insist the hotel must be ready for the holiday season the very next year, by 1929. With only 6 months to go, 1,200 workmen are gathered from all over Europe. They work 3 8-hour shifts, day and night, and move 54,000 tons of earth. Winter 1928 is violent, gales sweep the channel, then snow comes and frost, and they strike. But gradually, out of confusion and out of the forest, the great hotel rises. A monstrous mixture of Tudor and Norman, baronial and Baroque, Flemish and Gothic and goodness knows what. All it needs is a moat and drawbridge. Inside, reinforced concrete's covered with plaster to look like substantial stone. The Picardy grows up resorting to such little subterfuges. There are plaster gargoyles and plaster columns, plaster balustrades and plaster panelling. Like a film set, nothing's quite as permanent as it appears. By the spring of 1929, the lower floors are complete. Murals for the vast entrance hall show Louis XIV's fictitious Picardy regiment, after which the hotel's named. Hundreds of chandeliers are hung. 2 of them weigh more than a ton. There are 500 of these bedrooms ready for 1,000 guests, and 120 drawing rooms, each with fireplace big enough to roast an ox. Some suites have 10 rooms, and of course enormous bathrooms, plus kitchen and room for valet, maid or lady-in-waiting. There are 29 hotel valets for less significant guests who, by some oversight, arrive without theirs and can't face leaving that sunken Roman bath to don an unpressed dinner jacket. The hotel bar is like a Byzantine cathedral. To please the English guest, who may be flat on his back, its ceiling's ornamented with heraldic crests of British universities. The roof of the restaurant, where there's the Cambridge crest, the roof's so lofty that diners are sometimes disconcerted by bats. The scale's so vast that, even when fully booked, the Picardy was always to seem empty. On August the 12th, 1929, only 252 days after work began, the Royal Picardy, most beautiful hotel in the world, is ready to receive. Its motto is Louis XIV and, optimistic enough, Nec pluribus impar, a match for the whole world. But with the Royal Picardy, something always happens. The shock of the world's economic crash has reached Le Touquet. Casino takings drop by more than half, but the Picardy staff of 300 stand by, ready to cosset and overwhelm guests untouched by depression. They're controlled by Madame Louise Mainardi, today returning to her stricken charge to recall the reactions of those first arrivals.
The top of the hall was like a church, and there were stoppings. It's like inside of a church. Because it was so big. Everything was so big, so large, so wide, so high, that you had to stop when you came in.
It's a sad sight now, isn't it?
I'm very sad to see this. Very. Because I don't think that the Picardy would die, and then he's dying.
Yes.
Finished.
It's a large piece of your life, isn't it, going with it?
22 years. Pity. Oh, pity.
Yes, a pity. But whatever spirits haunt these rooms today, they must surely be high spirits.
Dinner party. During the dinner, we had a dancer, a Russian one, to entertain the ladies. And 1 year we tried to have a lady to entertain the gentlemen, to dance with them just in the dining room. If you remember, the dining room had a big dancing place. And the band were near the hall, like here,
Yes.
but the other side.
The White Russian was a sort of gigolo, was he?
Oh, no, it was an old, good Russian, white Russian, perhaps, can I say, baron or something like that. It was somebody in Russian. Not a gigolo.
No.
They're not allowed to come to the Picardy, the gigolos. No. He was, could I say, he was a little taller than you.
Yeah.
He was so, bien élevé.
Yes.
He was always making reference to the ladies. Do you want to have a dance, madame?
The ladies were pleased with him.
Oh, yes, some big compliments. Because it was a gentleman.
Yeah.
It was not a dancer.
Yes. Well, of course,
A nightclub.
The Picardy always had everything of the best, didn't it? Even the dancing instructor.
We tried.
Yes.
We tried to have the best.
What about the food and the
The food was absolutely superb. It really was, and I'm a gourmet. I know something about food and wine, and always did.
Dinner for one, please, Jane. Madam will not be dining. Yes, you may bring the whining. Love plays such funny games. Dinner for one, please, Jane. Close Madam's room, we've parted. Please don't look so downhearted. Love plays such funny games.
The endless kitchens, catering for 500 diners, create offerings soon to be submitted for the approval of those above stairs. In this culinary bustle, it seems that at last the Picardy has found itself, and been found by everybody who's everybody, the demanding, capricious candle burners of this jazz age. Some hungry for sensation, some, I suppose, just hungry. After painstaking preparation, elaborate dishes are proffered by 15 head waiters and 45 commis to diners subject to all sorts of protocol. Even President Erios refused dinner one night because he's not in evening dress. The stars of this Picardy scene are still remembered by those watching the performance, like Beverly Nichols.
And the Dolly sisters really were quite something, and they looked very much alike. And they appeared in one of the early Cochrane reviews. And one of the Dollys came under the attention of Mr. Gordon Surridge, who I think really could be described as the original sugar daddy of all time. He looked extraordinarily benevolent and was very, very rich. And he used to parade along, if you get the ballet symbol again, along the front with a dolly on each side. And it was a very convenient arrangement because, you see, nobody really quite knew which of the dollies was being favoured, which was doing what, or really, indeed, whether any of them were doing anything at all. And so when one of the dollies got a necklace or something like that, you see, automatically the other one had to get it too. So it was really highly moral and I thought quite charming.
Quite charming it appeared, but backstage, as usual with this extraordinary place, everything's not quite as it appears to be. All the outside walls are there, true, and the roof's in place, but inside, much of the building is still hollow. Of 9 floors, the top 3 are unfinished, and only 125 of the 500 bedrooms are ready. To give the impression all's complete, lace curtains hang in empty windows, and at night lights glow behind them. Only from outside is the whole place in action. But even so, the Picardy pretends that all is well. At the end of the season, there comes a cross-channel reaction to such deceit.
Today we received a call from one of our clients complaining very strongly regarding her accommodation in your hotel. She informed us, firstly,
there was a lack of furniture in my room, so much so that I couldn't unpack. It'd been necessary for my clothing to be repressed at a cost of £3.
Secondly, she was most upset to find
large holes in the carpet. Furthermore, on attempting to wash, I found that the taps had been marked incorrectly.
Finally, my client states that her room number 634 had a heavily stained ceiling. That led her to believe that had it rained then, the water would come through, no doubt.
What the unhappy lady in 643 didn't realize was that behind the facade, the floors above her were empty shells.
At the end of the season, when the accountants check their double-entry bookkeeping, they discover that even a full hotel only just covers the running costs. There's no money left over to start paying back the enormous capital investment, all the money that's been borrowed. With contractors bearing down and demanding payment, the owners of the hotel panic and declare themselves bankrupt. And this at the end of their very first successful season. Many small subcontractors are ruined, and one of them, in an unhappy echo of Wall Street, goes to the 9th floor of this hotel, which he helped to build, and leaps to his death.
In the winter of 1931, after only 2 years' life, the Royal Picardy is advertised for sale at 30 million francs, a quarter what it cost to build. But France, like the rest of the world, is struggling with economic crisis, and no buyer comes forward. The hotel's seen to be too grand to run, too splendidly impractical. After 6 months without a single offer, the public receiver gets together with banks and creditors and decides the only way to pay off the debts is to reopen the Picardy. Strangely, unexpectedly,
the hotel begins to prosper. By 1933, it's turning guests away. Suddenly, it's become, for English visitors, the continental focus of the high life. Wild enough, gay enough, near enough. A brilliant, spectacular scene for the champagne set of the frantic 30s.
What do you think was the appeal of Le Touquet in those days?
Well, for me, the appeal was partly it was the most elegant place I'd ever seen, and also it had an enchanting unreality. I think it was like a toy town. You felt that the little houses had been put up by somebody who was playing a game. And of course, lots of people were playing games there all the time. And it had a quality rather like those ballets that the early Diaghilev ballets used to produce, you felt that people were being puppets. And there was another word that I think rather describes it, which certainly dates me, which was the word naughtiness. There was a sort of, that little sort of arch quality about it.
Another observer of the social scene, Charles Graves, writes, Le Touquet provides the cream of indoor luxury, outdoor sport. The golf course is one of the world's best. You have acres of hard tennis courts, miles of pine woods through which you ride excellent hacks. You meet all your friends and they, like yourself, feel there's something champagne-like in the air. It makes them forget their inhibitions the minute they arrive. At least 90% of the Picardy's guests come from across the Channel bearing Anglo-Saxon inhibitions. The English Society News, printed in Le Touquet, reports proudly on the season, "This is London by the sea." Hotel registers read like pages from Who's Who, and in the 2,000 villas, the residents are worthy of Debrett.
Great personality, the friend of mine, who I stayed with in Le Touquet, was Mrs. Somerset Maugham. And she had this exquisite villa and had a very large number of friends who used to come over from England, and I think she attracted people. She certainly influenced the decoration of the houses round there, because that was her white period. And I remember so well this immense white drawing room with white clipped sheepskin on the floor, and a white piano and white leather chairs, and an immense silver screen in which she always had white flowers. And after she'd done this for a year, then all the other people sort of started joining in. You went from one white room to another. And that rather enhanced the sense of unreality.
In many ways, Le Touquet was indeed an unreal, detached setting, where the rich could play the days away. Where they could forget that just across the Channel there were 2 million unemployed in Britain's depressed areas. That even in Le Touquet itself there were areas one just didn't visit.
As a matter of fact, I think I only went on the beach once. I didn't even realise at one time that there was a beach. I thought the whole of Le Touquet, because when we arrived, whether it was by road or by train, we arrived at the Picardy Hotel and we didn't come along the front. We came directly there, and all I saw was the forest. I didn't realise that Le Touquet had a beach. And then when I did see it and I saw the hotels on the front and everything else, I knew why, because, well, it wouldn't attract our sort of people.
Hotels open just before Easter, and there's a scramble to be here, to be seen. On Good Friday afternoon, more than 200 Picardy guests arrive within 20 minutes. They're joined by 500 others, and for 3 days they're all too madly gay. On Monday, matched or unmatched, they leave like lemmings, and the hotel closes. Le Touquet's Easter parade is over. The good years are not to last long. In September 1938, during the Munich crisis, 200 guests leave on one day.
The 1939 season's also muted and shadowed by gathering armies. The few guests find a despondent Picardy about to close and face war. On May the 23rd, 1940, the German army arrives in Le Touquet. Soon there are 40,000 troops in town. The Royal Picardy, of course, is a natural headquarters for Wehrmacht. Its 9 concrete floors, a useful defense against small early war bombs. Unwelcome guests bring their own ungracious urgency. SS men prepare for the Channel crossing by learning to swim in the Picardy pool.
One night, amid great secrecy, Adolf Hitler comes here to address a conference of 200 of his senior officers. With a plaster model of the Channel coasts, they're deciding how to invade England. The Picardy and its cellars have become top secret. Any unauthorized persons passing this door will be shot.
In 1941, the RAF fly to bomb the Picardy. Hitler orders the headquarters to disperse and senior officers take to the woods. In their place, 3,000 troops are billeted. The hotel is full again, but this time with non-paying, do-it-yourself guests. General von Rundstedt uses the Picardy in his turn as CNC the West. And so, for 8 short months before his enforced suicide, does General Rommel. In June 1944, as the Allies try to convince the Germans they'll invade across the Channel, the short way, the Picardy's bombed again. In all, it was hit by 19 bombs. Soon after the Normandy landings, the retreat from the Channel ports begins. By September the 4th, the Germans have gone. The Canadian Army finds the streets of this smart little town filled with the rubble of war. They find also the Royal Picardy, an empty, echoing ruin. But Madame Maynard is still in possession and anxious to open for business. Le Touquet authorities refuse to lend money to repair and rebuild, so she works on a loan and 4 years later contrives to collect 90 staff and prepare just 86 of the 500 bedrooms. But this brave attempt in 1949 to breathe life into the post-war Picardy is short-lived. The giddy past has gone forever. Bright young things have grown into dull old things. Aircraft can fly to the Mediterranean sun in the time it once took to reach this temple to times gone by. And on a British travel allowance, few can afford the grand life. So the limousines of the smart set have gone, and Le Touquet must learn to cater for a different age, for different people. Le Touquet's summertime population's now made up of coach tourists and day trippers who don't feel the need to stay at the right places. So, after 2 halting years, the Royal Picardy surrenders. On September the 7th, 1951, the last guest leaves and the most beautiful hotel in the world closes its doors. No roses are blooming in Picardy grounds, nor ever will again.
With every dream gone,
is lonely and silent, the shades are all drawn, and my heart is heavy as I gaze upon a cottage for sale. The lawn we were proud of is waving in haze. Our beauty garden has withered away. Where you planted roses, the weeds seem to say, a cottage for sale. From every single window, I see your face. But when I reach a window, there's empty space. The keys in the mailbox, the same as before, but no one is waiting for me anymore. The end of our story is told down the door, a cottage for sale.
This time there's a finality, a certainty about the closure. The furniture, brought so proudly, so expensively, so hopefully from England almost a quarter of a century ago, is piled in storerooms or left to rot. Some of it is looted. So, what's left to happen to this out-of-place palace, this poor old Picardy?
Created by 1,200 men, being destroyed by 3. Picardy people may have burned the candle at both ends, but for a few short, excited years, they and their playground gave a lovely light. And of their Le Touquet, it was said, there was a kind of politeness in the air. But these are rude days. Picardy could cope unruffled with any arrival. But in what nightmare could it ever expect to receive such a visitor? The Picardy's coming down to make room for an educational city where students will be taught, of all things, the art of hotel management. There's another irony. This rich rubble, these churned acres of bricks and concrete and plaster, which once sheltered the very rich, are going as foundation for a holiday camp.
After 40 crowded years, the death of an hotel, the gay ghosts of the 20s and the 30s, the marching echoes of Nazi Germany, the brave, empty hopes of the 50s, they've all gone. And this stately plaster temple to luxury, to extravagance, must crumble before the sound of the 60s.
And the Royal Picardy, the hotel that was always too much, returns to dust.